From Perth, Australia, and broadcasting around the world, you're listening to The O Show with your host, Oren McCory. The O Show is a no-nonsense podcast bringing you the best advice on training, mindset, and nutrition to supercharge your efforts in the gym, the kitchen, and most importantly, in your head. Don't forget to share this episode on your social media. Now, let's get to it.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, guys. Welcome to today's episode of The O Show. I am your host, Oren McCory, and today I have on probably one of my first American guests. I'm not sure if the time zone really works out great for us in Australia here, so he's definitely one of the first, if not the first. So I'd like to welcome on the host of the Excellence Cartel podcast, Jeff Black. How are you, Jeff?
Dude, I'm doing so good, man. Thanks for making it happen. It's dark here. It looks bright there, so I think we're doing the right thing. I feel slightly honored that I might be the first U.S. person on your podcast. That's super cool. I didn't even know that fact before we went live. So thank you for the honor, I guess.
I'll have to look through, mate. If there is anyone ahead of you, it's not been many people at all. So it's just for the time difference. It just doesn't really work out that great. But we'll definitely kick off with a good episode here, and no doubt people will be saying, okay, get more American guests on because I like this guy. So, mate, let's get into a bit about you, because obviously I found you through the Excellence Cartel. I was following Jason Theobald, obviously, on Instagram, and I think last year at some stage I just noticed he kept posting about the podcast, and I listen to heaps of podcasts, so I was just like, oh yeah, cool, let me check this one out. And I would say you're sort of like the main host on that, and you sort of direct the traffic in that. So tell me about the podcast, tell me what you guys do, and tell me how you got into doing podcasting.
Yeah. So the podcast actually is a funny story. So I've known Jason for a while. I met Jason at 2010 Junior Nationals, and we were backstage, and he forgot like some pump-up food, and I offered him a Snickers bar. And our friendship literally formed over the Snicker bar. We just kind of stayed in contact. And then in 2014, I was like, man, I didn't want to, I posted something on Facebook. I was just kind of done bodybuilding for the time being. And he hit me up and he was like, what's going on? And I had a coach that was just very meal plan driven. So it was all bro food all the time. And I did that for 6.5 years. My last prep, the last 6 weeks, was tilapia and asparagus 6 times a day. Wow. And I did it. And I still to this day have not eaten tilapia. But Jason was like, hey, let me show you a different way. And I said, cool. So I did it. I started getting my motivation back and feeling better. And this was about 2012, 2013, because I did the flex in 14. And he was, finally, I was like, hey, man, I'm going to hire you for a prep. I want to see if I got it in me. And then just over time, man, me and him became friends. Like we just clicked really well. And I got to know Jeffrey Sue because he works with Jason for a long time. I'd known Jason on the boards like Professional Muscle and RX Muscle. I was a local trainer in Nashville. I didn't really, screw with the online space too much up until honestly, probably 2019 when the podcast launched. I was kind of more into it. But over just time, one day I had this idea. I was listening to these podcasts and I was like, man, these fitness people are fun, but they're not like funny and they're not like real fun. and I was just, I was like, I just want to hear different shit. I want to hear different personalities. I want to hear different bantering. Why not just, maybe I could do a podcast. So I'm kicking it around and I messaged Jason. I'm like, hey, if I did a podcast, like if I produce it, do the whole thing, would you want to join me? He's like, absolutely. But I knew we needed a third wheel to really make it work because, as you know from doing the L show, that this stuff takes time. Like this isn't easy. Like you have to think of ideas, create the content to the ideas, walk it out. Does it actually work? Does it flow? I mean, hell, you don't know how this goes with me. You have to take a swing, on this kind of stuff. And so Jeff Sue seemed like a logical choice because he was kind of counter to me and counter to Jason a little bit as well. So the three of us had different views, different demographics for the most part. I pitched him on the idea and we went live and, it kind of took off, man. We got real lucky. Just people were kind of into what we were doing and what we were talking about.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I think one reason why I really like it is you cover a heap of different topics. Like it's not just pigeonholed as one thing. Like you still talk to guys about business, leadership. You'll talk about hormones. You'll talk about sex with female guests. You know, talking about understanding females and creating that that relationship sort of security around talking about sex, and like all those sort of episodes are the ones that I'm like, wow, this is something like doesn't just get talked about a lot. And I was listening to the one about sex a few weeks ago, and I was like, you know what, this is like three guys on a podcast interviewing a female and talking about things like orgasms and sex toys. And I was like, this doesn't get touched on normal fitness podcasts. So I think it's just a really unique podcast, and it just kind of flows really well between you guys, and especially the guests you guys get on.
Well, dude, so like for a long time, I think anyone in the fitness industry could say that it was always the same summits people were talking at, or the seminars, always the same group of people, always doing the same thing. And part of it with the Excellence Cartel is we wanted a vehicle so we could showcase other coaches in the industry with what they're doing, because it's not just the three of us doing cool kid shit. There's a lot of other coaches doing really cool kid shit too.
Yeah.
And that was like a driving force to us behind it. And that's how we met Sonia, who was on that sex episode. I pitched her and was like, hey, I really want to talk about this, but I don't know how this flies. I think the way it flies is if I'm slightly coy and funny, and we just make it kind of like fun and engaging, and it's vulgar with a girl. And I think and she was like, fuck yes, I'm down. And I was like, all right. And then we went with it. And dude, personally, some of it, I caught some heat for it, my personal life at the time. And then I think the others did, but it was one of those things where I was like, I had, believe it or not, 31 messages, because I kept count of women who listened to that and was like, thank you for talking about that. Because I was so embarrassed thinking these problems belong to just me. Yeah. From like bleeding during intercourse to inability to have orgasm to not understand that it was pelvic floor muscles, and just to have that open, it was so worth it, man. And that's where the podcast is fun. Like, we had Paul Austin on about psychedelics, and that one was fun. But the best one we've done, and I will say this is probably the best, single-handedly one of the best podcasts to ever listen to. And I'm not saying it because we did it, but it's Turning Pro by Stephen Pressfield.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's the author of Turning Pro, and that podcast, like, that was some magic there. Like the four of us just clicked, and it was just deep. And he's coming back on in a few weeks, and I'm just excited. But man, the guests are, honestly, I just messaged them. And if anyone's listening, ever think about talking about a podcast, I always just get to the point. Like, hey, I have this podcast. This is what we're about. No, I don't have probably the audience number you want, but I promise you'll have a good time, and you'll at least get your money's worth in time for the exchange. I mean, I got Sal for Sal. Like, I just asked some of the coaches I know, hey, can you get me in contact with Sal? Because I thought Sal would be great to talk about some stuff. Yeah. And then same with Justin Mahaley and all these other coaches that have these big followings. It was just on the basis like, hey, I really think that you speak on this topic. Come on my podcast and let's talk about this topic with us. Yeah. And, it's been fun, man. That's what makes it cool.
Yeah, exactly. And like your podcast has such big reach versus mine. So like I'm reaching out to the coaches who won't get as much of a return either, but like it's the same idea. It's like you're gonna come on, we're gonna have a laugh, and we're not gonna script anything and just talk shit for an hour, and it's gonna be a bit of fun, right? Because that's the kind of you kind of want with a podcast. You don't want anything too scripted. And I'll admit that I used to script this, and this is something we were talking about before, where I would lay out some killer questions for people, but then you're always just waiting for the chance to throw in the next question, and it doesn't flow as well. And I know you said like you only do the intros on the Excellence Cartel to make sure it's on track with everything, and then it just goes into unscripted territory where it's just fun, right?
Right. Well, the reason I have scripted is because I usually get high before the podcast, and I would trip over it and be like, shit, and I have to go back and like own it. But it was one of those things where in the beginning we were real rigid. The first ones are still up, and I went back and listened to our first one the other day and was like, oh my God, I was such a timid little girl, little bitch on that thing. Oh Jesus. I was so embarrassed. And now it's just like, we line it up and it's like, cool. All right, let's get it going. And, I think that that's something where the industry could get better. we're always aiming for what we think we can hit, and we should start aiming a lot higher because the impact always trickles down. So coaches are always looking at other coaches being like, well, I don't know if I want to do that because they only have 10,000 followers or only this amount listens. But I argue for any coach that having these conversations is vital because it's reps under center. It's allowing you to improve a skill of communication. And if you can communicate better with just anybody on any topic, that sure as shit's going to translate to your business. And it doesn't matter what business you do, but communication is crucial.
Yeah, 100%, man, 100%. And that kind of, we can go off on a tangent here now into the more leadership style stuff that we spoke about, because obviously you're developing these skills in communication. You're the leader of the Excellence Cartel in terms of you're kind of steering the ship and where the conversation goes a lot of the time. And you've got a very successful business. You've got your gym there in Nashville. You got the online coaching, and just everything you do just seems very professional, even down to the books you read. Like, how many books did you read last year?
108.
108 books in a year, man. I'm like, I think I've done 8.
So okay. So this is, I've said this before, but it's been a minute. But how I got into reading the books I did, like I had my brittle bone disease, osteogenesis imperfecta. I'd have 18 surgeries to walk again. So this is this is around 1989 to 1995. This is occurring. So you're looking at Nintendo, Sega, TV, but I was real big into reading, and I used to read like Dungeons and Dragons. I played Dungeons and Dragons for a long time. I actually played it all through college. You guys can laugh at me for it all you want. I like to think that D&D did help me with a skill of mine, and that is my visionary role that comes very naturally to me in business. I'm able to see things way down the road because Dungeons and Dragons, I had to sit there and like contemplate what this other person, the dungeon master, was presenting to me, and then map out what was in his head versus what I was seeing, and play my moves accordingly. And I think that's really translated well in business. But how it started with the books is I was getting into reading again. I kind of went through a sabbatical. I just didn't want to screw with it. A lot of it was honestly, I was broke and I was working way too much and trying to pursue bodybuilding because it was feeding the chip on my shoulder that the doctor said I couldn't ever walk again without AIDS. And then not only did I do that, but I shoved shit down their throat and became a bodybuilder. And I wasn't like too bad at bodybuilding, not great, but I mean, I wasn't that bad. I actually was beating people, and it was very prideful for me. So one day I started getting into, after working with Jason, I decided to reverse diet, but I noticed I liked my fasted cardio time. Like that was something that I really enjoyed. So it was like 30 minutes. And I was doing it 5 days a week. And I would just go in before my clients at the gym because at the time I was just full-time coach in person. And I was like, I'll just start reading, and just see where it goes. And then one day I was reading in a Forbes magazine article or something that Bill Gates reads a book a week. And I was like, you know what? I could beat Bill Gates at that. Fuck Bill Gates. I could beat Bill Gates. And I started like reading these books. In my first year, I got like 28, and I was like, shit, this is harder than I thought. And then next year it was like 37. And then one day I was like, okay, if I want to read these books, and the average books are about 260 pages, then I need to read X number of pages a day. And now I read 60 to 70 pages a day. Okay. And so how that happened is because people are like, well, how do you do it? And I'm like, look, man, I have my fasted cardio for 40 to 50 minutes, maybe sometimes an hour. I just go until I kind of don't want to do it. And I don't get on my social media much during the day. If I have a lunch break, which I take every day for 30 minutes, I read on my lunch break. I read if I need stimulation, and I go, you kind of hack at it. And it just, I can be honest with you. I think that reading was a strategic advantage for me because it allowed me to have intimate conversations with hundreds of people over the last few years and think differently than I ever would have thought.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's pretty deep, man. Like, what would you say would be the best book that you've ever read then in terms of leveling up mindset? Like if you had to pick one book, I think I know what you might say, but.
Oh, without a doubt, if you're talking about this from a business standpoint, like if you're saying professional Jeff, without a doubt, Developing the Leader Within You by John Maxwell.
Yeah.
If you're asking me personal Jeff that likes to run the score up 100-0, I'm telling you Relentless by Tim Grover.
Yeah, that's a big book as well, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a good book to read because he's giving you the inside look, which is like, hey, there's dirt. Like winning is an addiction. Winning is no different than me than like when a gambler has a gambling addiction. And what I mean by that is when people win, you don't want to fucking lose again.
Yeah.
And you'll do whatever it takes. And that's how you get in burnouts. That's how you lose relationships. That's how you have all these things compound. And I argue, I'm like, man, it's an addiction, because once you get a taste of that, dude, I'm sure you don't want to lose again. Your family starts looking at you different. Your friends look at you different. Shit, you look at yourself different, and you like what you see. And that confidence echoes out. And then from there, it just grabs a hold of you.
Yeah, 100%. And do you feel that confidence through bodybuilding, after what you said with the bone disease, that you that's what bodybuilding provided you as well, with just building that confidence and saying fuck you to those doctors?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, I remember, so I broke my leg on a skateboard accident. My femur, I broke it in 5 places. I got done with the surgery. My leg was 2.5 inches longer than my left leg. So they said, okay, well, Jeff's legs, because I was born with both my legs broken. My parents didn't know I had my legs broken, but when you change a baby, what do? You pick the baby up by the legs to change them. So I would scream bloody hell, and no one could figure it out for like 6 weeks. And then this doctor diagnosed me with osteogenesis imperfecta. So my legs by then were born bowed. So they were like, okay, well, if he broke his right leg and we put this titanium rod in there, then we're just going to go over here and break his left leg and put a titanium rod. That will fix the problem. Voila. Well, they never measured my legs after the surgery. So my left leg was still an inch shorter. So this doctor theorized to do a bone structure machine. And so for, if you've ever seen the halo that they put on people's heads to hold their heads to have the bolts going through, I had that on my left lower tibula and fibula. I had 27 spokes going through it. I had to cut the skin off of the spokes because it would pus and ooze and they get infected and all this shit. But there was one time, it was probably like 8 weeks out, because I did the surgery for 12 weeks before they realized mentally I tapped out. I wasn't sleeping at all by the end of it, because it kept my legs stretched and I had to keep turning these knobs. So my legs stayed broken and I had to do this every 6 hours. And the leg was behind and the doctor went to do this radical turn. And I was like, hey, that doesn't feel right. And as he's turning the screws, I'm starting to get like, hey. So the next thing I know, his assistant lays on top of me. A nurse grabs my other leg. My mom grabs my head. And then the dude just keeps going and he snaps my leg.
Wow.
And I was like all sorts of screwed up over that. Like I just now recently kind of worked through some of that stuff in counseling because I buried it for so long.
Yeah.
And I go through that, the leg heals. And then my very first step in physical therapy, the leg breaks. So I had to go back underneath another surgery 3 days later. So, I went through all that. And I remember him saying to me, Dr. Madigan, that I would never walk without some form of aid. And I think I was like 12 years old and I refused to accept it. I was like, well, I'm going to walk into school my freshman year of high school because I was homeschooled at that point because all the surgeries were so intense and back to back. And I ended up walking into high school my freshman year, my first day.
That's massive.
Then I was bullied my freshman year. And then one day I got up while he was doing a math problem, the kid who kept calling me cripple, and I jumped up there and started hitting him in the face. Got suspended. My mom wasn't too mad. She was happy that I stood up for myself. I'll be honest. That was a turning point for me because I didn't really stood up for myself because I just had been the shit kicked out of me by all I went through. And I was going down an aisle of a local grocery store, Kroger, in Knoxville, Tennessee, and saw a cover of Paul DeMaio with his big ass legs on a Flex magazine. And I remember being like, if I could be big like him, no one would screw with me. And that's how it literally started. It wasn't like, oh, I want to go bodybuild. It wasn't like, oh, I want to go do this. It was like legitimately the only place I had to put my anger, to put my frustration, to put my pitiful little teenage angst of why me in a box and play nicely with it. And it was the only thing my mom and dad would kind of let me do because they looked at it as being healthy for me. And you know what? They were just happy to see me doing some shit again. So if my mom and dad really knew probably like that bodybuilding was like that, working out with weights. Because back then the doctors like he shouldn't do it, but my parents were like, oh, but working out's healthy. But if they had like really stopped to think like our kid with this brittle bone disease has pretty much broken every bone in his body, because I was very outgoing as a child, for lack of a better word, you know, is doing this shit in the gym with weights. I don't know if they would let me do it, but they were just so, I think, enamored with the idea that I was doing something physical, that they would let, you know, I mean, like, dude, my pelvis was hairline fractured my freshman year in high school, because I was bullied one day, went to the gym that night, hairline fractured my pelvis. They gave me crutches and I just didn't want the crutches. So I asked to be able to let out of my classes early by a few minutes so I could walk to the next class. I refused to take the crutches because I didn't want to be teased anymore.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. And that's like, that takes a big mindset to be able to handle that and just be like, you know, how many people would just take the fucking crutches and like everything else that comes with it? But you were like, no, I can work around this. I'm not going to take the crutches. I'm going to put up with the pain, and I'm just going to find a way to make it work by like asking to go a bit earlier to your classes. Like, it shows that there's always another option there, right? And it just takes the mental capacity and the strong will to be able to do it.
Well, you know, man, it honestly, dude, it wasn't until I went into counseling in my late 20s after my second failed marriage that this counselor pointed out to me. He was like, do you not realize what you've done? And I was like, what the fuck do you mean? He goes, well, call me crazy or call me stupid, but I just don't think anyone with a brittle bone disease would be as jacked as you are. And I was like, yeah, man, this is fueled by, you know, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, I don't think you understand. Like, he goes, I just somehow don't believe it. And, you know, for a long time, man, all I knew was all the pain of physical therapy and all the hours I had to commit just to learn how to walk again. And I remember I wanted to do it just because I wanted to be normal. And then with bodybuilding, I just wanted to do it just because I wanted to be left alone by people. I didn't want to be their source of ridicule for something I couldn't control. And you know, in all honesty, I don't like to take pride in that because and what I've done, because I know in my heart there was just no other option for me. So it's not like I get on Instagram and like, look at me, I'm the only guy who did this, you know, overcame OI with my bodybuilding. I look at it more like I did what 11, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old Jeff needed to do.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much how it came to be. It wasn't like some miraculous little baby Jesus in a manger story or anything like that. It was very just like, I just did it out of necessity for what I needed for my mental health at the time.
Yeah, fair, man. And tell me, how did you get into coaching then, moving from that sort of high school age into coaching?
Dude. So, you know, like I get out of high school, I go to college, I fail out of college, just because I just didn't care. I just didn't want to do it. I was doing what other people told me to do. I was doing pre-med, did good first semester, second semester, didn't care. I was working in nightclubs at night, like just blowing off all this angst energy. And then I was 21 and my dad had called me and said, hey, the Department of Homeland Security is hiring in the wake of 9/11. You know, you're in criminal justice. Because by then I switched over to criminal justice. He was like, you should really consider this because, you know, it's the first time they're going to hire anybody, you know, without all his degrees, et cetera. So I said, okay. So I went through it all and I got a phone call. And they're like, hey, we're going to hire you to go become a federal agent. We're going to swear you in October of 2002 in New York, Manhattan. And I got to see Ground Zero. It was real touching. But in 2002, I was a federal agent working for the Department of Homeland Security.
Wow.
Working in the airports as a supervisor and trying to tell 40 and 50-year-olds like what the fuck to do. And I got a crash course in leadership. And I did that for 5 years until 2007. But in 2005, my ex-wife was pregnant with our first child, or her second child, my son Jared, who's my first son. And I was already working like 48 hours a week at the airport, and I just couldn't fucking handle it anymore. I was like, hey, I can't work any more hours, but I know, you know, we need more money. There's this guy at the gym, because my workout partners dropped like 40 pounds working out with me, who keeps telling me I need to become a trainer, who keeps sending all his minions, because I referred to him as his minions, to come tell me I need to, you know, talk to him about coaching. Do you mind if I go consider doing that? And she was like, no, I think that'd be great for you. You know, you love the gym, da 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 da. I'm like, okay. So I dress up in a suit and show up, and Clint, man, he's fucking wearing like just like sandals, flip flops, you know, shorts and t-shirt. And he's like, yeah, man, like, and just talking to me, offered me just a little bit more money than I was already making at the government, you
Yep.
know, working for the gov. And I was like, well, that's intriguing. And I had bonuses and commissions. And I was like, all right. So I started doing it. And I got my first client, you know, and I had prior to that, man, honestly thought, because I came up in the gyms in the 90s and the 2000s where trainers were just douchebags who just stretched chicks out and did,
Yeah.
by and large, what I found to be stupid stuff, you know, like stand and talk to them while they're running on a treadmill. Like,
Yeah.
what's the purpose of that, you know? And so I didn't really have a good lens to look at personal training. And I got my first client, and she wanted to look sexy, man, for her 10-year wedding anniversary. She had 3 months, and she came running in 3 months later, picked me up, swirling me around, and she felt sexy wearing it. And I kind of knew at that point I was on to something. And then fast forward to 2007, our boss, David Beecroft, he was a former lieutenant colonel in the military. And he used to always have lunch when all the people would have lunch. He would go down there and have lunch for like an hour or two throughout the shift so he could get to talk to people. One day we were talking, and I had asked him why I'd missed out on a promotion. And he was like, just need more time, man. You're too young. He's like, it's not that you're not talented, you're too young. He's like, and in the government world, that really won't fly. He goes, plus you're better at training. He goes, I see what you do with the people here at work, helping them out with their stuff. He goes, I think that's more you. One day I got up and was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I turned my notice in, and I never looked back in 2007. And that's literally my little fairy tale Cinderella story.
Nice, man. Nice. And then fast forward to now, 2021, and you've got the gym there in Nashville. You're doing heaps of online coaching. You've got a very successful business. So how have you found that transition from going all in, like, you know, at 2007 or whatever that was, to now where you're running this hugely successful gym and online business?
Oh, dude, I took a pay cut. I was making like in the 50s in 2007 with Homeland Security, and I took a pay cut back down into the 30s. But it was just better for my mental health. And, you know, I just figured like, you know, hey, I'll figure it out. I didn't really kind of go any other way. I had my bumps and bruises. It honestly, man, wasn't until 2013 I got kicked out of the gym I was at because I talked some shit to the owner about him not showing up to his sessions. Because I was like, if you don't want to be there, then pay me and I'll train him and give you a cut. I was trying to be nice, but he viewed it as an insult. But that's why I later bought his gym, and he's not doing it anymore. But you know, and he did that right before Christmas, dude. And so I went into my apartment complex and talked to the managers, and they were like, yeah, you can train your clients. So I went from like 40 clients in person on the books to 70 in the course of a year in an apartment gym. They went back to the gym. And then in 2015, he notified Derek and I that he was going to sell it. And Derek and I kind of each had a family. We looked at each other and we're like, well, if you cover 50% of the bills, I'll cover 50% of the bills. So we went in, we formed Iron House. And we did this 50-50 partnership for the first 2.5 years. And then he got sick with pancreatic cancer the day after Thanksgiving, November of 2017. And then after that, I assumed control of Iron House, and then he passed away in August of 2018. And then since then, it's just been kind of me at the helm, you know, and I've watched the gym go from the original 42 members to 797 members now, I think we have.
Yeah, wow.
In the course of under 6 years at a higher price point. I've doubled the square footage. You know, man, it really honestly wasn't until year 10, if I'm being honest with you, because I got into training in 2005 and 2010 is when I bought the gym. In 2010, I think is when I was kind of probably making a little bit of money, but not like a lot, but enough where I could breathe. And I was willing to take a bunch of risk. I was like, well, I'm used to being poor. What's the difference in just still staying poor and using what free money I'm getting to keep building something?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think by far, dude, the in-person coaching, I love online coaching because it's a different experience, but man, there's just something about having a gym and being able to create your own energy and and be a part of something in your community that just stands apart, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. So what separates the gym now from what it was before? Like 42 clients in half the space at like a lower price, and they couldn't scale it the way you have. What's different about Iron House now versus then?
Well, I had to get honest with who I really was and what I really wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And who I really was and what I really wanted were different than my business partner. He wanted a clubhouse, a tree house kind of feel, and I wanted a fucking business. And that was okay for me for the first 2.5 years, because I was just building clients, building this impressive roster of people and just chilling and cruising. Dude, I was training 70 in-person people a week. Yeah. Like I was Sunday through Saturday, just constant rain of people. And now I like online because I do like 30, 40 people in person. I do the other 70 to 100 people online. So it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
But what the big difference was, I realized, okay, what is it that Nashville doesn't have that I think I could create for Nashville? And Derek and I had this idea, which was, and I knew when he got sick that the idea had to change. Like I couldn't hold on to all the values that him and I created together. I had to hold on to some and hold on to and get rid of others. And what I held on to was I wanted a place where everyone who entered could be their own hero. So that's like our thing. We just want you to be your own hero. When you're in our walls, train hard, give your all. It's Rocky. That's what we want. And I started looking around and I was like, okay, we're in an industrial park. It's already kind of edgy. What if I make it edgier? What if I make it trendier? What if I put graffiti in here? And I just started like picturing this gym coming to life. And dude, every single red cent I got, I just put forth to it. And then we went from being in the red December of 2017 to immediately in the black. And we haven't looked back since. During COVID, with us being closed 3 months, we had a tornado hit right before the mayor closed us. We still grew 74% last year.
Wow.
Yeah. And, I doubled that down to, I have sought out at all times in the last, especially 3 years since that happened, to get better mentors, to ask better questions, to read more, to think more, and to write more. And if I could do these things, I felt like I could always stay ahead, because if you do all the strength assessments with everyone who loves business, will do strength assessments and try to find out what they're strong in and what they're not. And all mine always come back visionary. But everything you always read in the business books to talk about visionary is when companies die, it's that the visionary can no longer see for the company. Like Blockbuster is always used in the leadership books. That Netflix said, hey, Blockbuster, buy us up. We're the next big thing. And Blockbuster's like, no. And now there's like one Blockbuster left, but everybody knows Netflix, right?
Yeah.
So it was the visionary not being able to see further. And that's like been my big thing with business. I'm like, I always have to be able to see what's coming and what's down the road. And as long as I can do that, I'll forever keep growing and challenging myself. But I think unless you're innovating, you're just dying, man.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair, man. That's fair. And how do you manage your week in terms of that workload where you're running a gym, you've got 30 to 40 clients, you run a podcast, you've got your online clients on top of that as well. Like how do you structure your day? And plus you're reading so many books in a year, right? Like that's a lot of stuff, man. Like I don't know many people who could handle that workload.
Dude, it's all about what you kind of just build into your routine. And I'm a master I refuse to let time master me. I master time. I tell everybody that is legitimately your intimate choice that you make, and you only have to come be at peace with that, because sooner or later that time runs out. And as long as you can look back on that. So let me put this in perspective. The beauty of being able to train people in person, my friend, is that I'm able to see these and get to talk to 60, 70-year-old guys and ladies. And they all are like, man, if I could just go back and do it differently, I would have not said all these no's, and I would have said more yes, and I would have done all these things. I've really been like, you know what? I don't think all these people would be telling me this if they didn't really think I should be doing it. And I've just kind of done it. So with that being said, with my company Iron House, I choose to most business people, they get into business and they're like, okay, I'm going to create this company and that's going to make me 150 grand a year. And then I'm going to go over here and do this and this. And they don't really take care of their staff. So my staff, I actually do the inverse. I take less money and pay my staff more. And because of that, my front of house staff, I've had no turnover in over 2 years.
Wow.
And I think that that's a big thing for gyms, which I talked to other gym owners about. I'm like, cut your revenue to yourself, cut that check back a little bit. If Miss Johnson and Mr. Jones and Billy and Susie and everybody still see the same 2 people in the mornings and nights, see your same hardcore 3 or 4 people, that's going to give them more confidence to want to show up at your gym. They're going to feel, because the biggest thing right now is Planet Fitness started a narrative, which was a lie, which bothers me as a gym owner. They got everyone to believe that gyms were intimidating. Gyms have never been fucking intimidating. I've been in them since 1995. I never remembered one bodybuilder like, oh, look at this little crippled diseased kid walking through the gym, or look at that fat person. I've never heard it. And if I had, I either was so shocked I forgot, but I don't think it's ever happened. Most people in the gym they're getting better, so they applaud anyone who's in there, because we all know we all go through our own battles every day to be able to drag our carcasses to the gym. And I don't know, but to defeat that narrative, I think that the way that I found to do that was to pay my staff more and to have that consistency there. And it's just been a great experience, man, for me, top to bottom in that regard. If you'd like for me to talk about the online coaching realm, I can say that was a whole shit show to get into that I never understood at all. And I don't even think I properly understand that one bit still to this day. But
yeah, go ahead. Like, cause that's obviously people hear you do 70 to 100 online clients and they think, right, you've got this shit nailed. You must be productive. You must know everything. And you're saying that you don't really understand it that much. So
yeah, what I mean by that is what content hits, I don't know. So this is how I'm going to frame all this out so you can understand my time mastery here. I had to segue this because the part about online coaching is it's a lot like having an OnlyFans account. You have to sit around and think about, legitimately, dude, I have a bottle of vitamin C. I'm going to talk about vitamin C tomorrow. I'm going to talk about a little iodine tomorrow from my recent book I read. And I'm going to lock myself in this fucking room for 4 hours until I do 1 video and 2 pieces of content. Yeah. Because you have to be able to turn it and burn it. So how my week aligns is Monday is all my meetings, leadership stuff I do. Tuesday is my podcast day. Where I do freelance writing stuff, like anything ad lib I want to do. Wednesday is my first part of my morning is my recovery. And then I have 5 hours of content creation. Mm-hmm. And then Thursday I do all my check-ins. And then Friday I clean up check-ins. I have a team meeting with my online coaches that I work with. And then I have Trainer Revenue Multiplier, which is a group of coaches. I have the platinum calls on Friday, which I lead in. And I work a little bit on the in-between, man, but my schedule's too diligent. I'm up every day by 3:30. I'm in bed every night, unless I'm doing something special like here, no later than 7:30. I just stay to it every day. I take Sundays off, but I think that if you're an entrepreneur or you're anyone who's looking to like survive in business, I think that the habits is the most overlooked thing. And the themes that you could create for each day. What I mean by that, like Monday is my leadership day. Tuesday is my podcast day. Wednesday is my content day. Thursday is my coach day. Yeah. Friday is my coach day. I know who I need to be for those days. So it's easy for me to slide into those roles. And then by now, everyone kind of knows my schedule. So clients kind of like leave me alone and my staff and allows me to do that. And I think that's been the only way I've been able to manage it. And it didn't start out like that, dude. And I tell everybody that. I'm like, it started out with frustration, always feeling like I was failing, always feeling like I was falling behind. And I had a CEO that I trained and he was like, dude, how do you approach your day? And I was like, well, and he's like, oh, the fact that you had to begin like that tells me you don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, all right, and he's like, let me give you a tip. And there was a book he got it from, and he told me the book, and I can't remember now, but he's like, read that and do this. And dude, I did. And just over time, I've slowly mastered that. And that's where I'm able to get away with running an online business, an in-person business, and then a podcast, and then a gym.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we do the Physique Education Collective as well, which is a collective of a bunch of different coaches presenting on topics about 2 to 3 times a year. So it gets busy, man. But I mean, to be honest, like, got to do it while the iron's hot.
That's it, mate, 100%. And it's, it's definitely a good insight into how somebody successful structures their week. And it's something that people, because sometimes we have trainers on here who listen, sometimes it's just gym pop people. But if it's somebody who's just lacking a bit of routine in their general life, their normal 9-to-5 job or whatever, they can still take something from that. So that's pretty cool. What would you say would be the biggest, or let's say the best bit of advice that you've ever been given? I was just thinking that when you were saying about that book that the CEO told you about, like what's the single best bit of advice you've ever been given?
All right. So I don't know the single best advice I've been given, but I can tell you 3 pieces of advice that I give out that I know has been given to me over time through wisdom, which is how my brain formulates it. Take risk, make mistakes, and I will fail forward.
Nice.
And as long as so that's kind of like been like my thing. Like I'm okay. Like everyone has always told me take risk. I've always heard from the big guys I trained who made the 9 figures, you know, CEOs and all this silly stuff that I managed to be very blessed with to talk to. We're always like, make a bunch of mistakes, color outside the lines, and then above all else, just fail forward. And I think that that's pretty much been like the culmination of what I've tried to do in my professional life.
Yeah, nice, man, nice. And those are three quite big ones. So can you dig in a little bit deeper on those 3 just to explain them if people don't get it?
Okay, so this is a good one. Risk. I sat down with my whole team when COVID hit and they locked the gyms down. And I said, I'm just going to cut my salary, but I'm not cutting anyone else's. Everyone else still gets fucking paid. I went to my girlfriend at the time. I said, hey, here's how much money I have in the bank. Here's how much money the company has in the bank. I'm not changing the fucking thing, and I'll go bankrupt by October. She's like, is that what you feel? And I said, that's exactly what I feel. And she's like, all right. And then, you know, we got lucky. We opened back up in May because we're in more of a late May. It was May 29th because we live in Tennessee. So we've got that red versus blue divide here in America. It's silly. But we were allowed to open back up. And then I decided, I was watching it grow and I was watching stuff. I said, you know what we need? And I was telling my buddy, Nick, and who's my sales manager and a really good friend of mine, and Thera, who's like my integrator, she runs Iron House. I said, we need to create a nightmare for our competition, as Nick Saban says. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, everybody right now is restricting because they all think that more like lockdowns are going to happen and all this shit. And I was like, I've already made it clear I'm not going to lock back down. So what am I worried about? And they were like, right. And I'm like, okay, we have like this amount of money in the bank. We're going to go get ourselves a master marketer and we're going to go like quadruple our marketing budget. And they're like, are you serious? And I was like, yep. And then as fate would have it, I got Jason Phillips on my podcast. I went to one of his events. Me and Nick liked him. I was like, Nick, if you want to work with him, I'll hire him. But Nick, I'm working with Matt with TRM. I'm trying to grow my online. That'd be something you need to do for this part. And he was like, fuck, I'll do it. I was like, okay. And next thing I know, Iron House starts getting $4 for every dollar we spent. I literally was willing to go all in and hedge my bets. Right now, we have taken total control, not total control, that'd be a bit arrogant to say, but a good chunk of the local area that I serve is now within our gym. Like we're growing at a rate that I'm going to run out of space. So that was probably one of the bigger ballsier risks that I did back to back. Because I just I didn't want to believe the narrative that they would lock us back down. And number 2, I didn't believe that a lot of people would, as time was wearing on, it should stay more open. I was like, they just can't come back through and do this. Like no one's going to follow up with this. I know other places have, but I didn't think it would happen here. And I got very lucky, but that was a risk, and I was prepared to burn my family's future house out, that's what I was saving for, was my family's house. And I was willing to put that on the line because it was the right thing to do. They needed the money, and I couldn't help it that my government was ill prepared and rather terrible in their response to get people paid. So I just did the right thing.
Yeah, that's fair, man. That's big, right? That's
Right.
big. Look after the staff, like you said.
But coaches make this mistake all the time, and people do in business. Because I'm lucky, I'm in local leadership stuff with my community. I'm in a group, and I get to talk to local business owners. And man, dude, some of them are just scared. And I'm like, what do you all got to lose? Like think about it this way. Like, how old are you?
I'm 32, coming 33.
Okay, so you're 33, right? You got about a good 30 more years of good work in you, right? At least. I mean, like, let's hope so, right? So what does it matter if you blow through some money on marketing? What does it matter if you blow through some money on buying the books or taking the classes or going to networking events or, you know, starting a podcast or creating a YouTube channel or going and learning video? Like, what does it matter? I never understood that. I think that was one thing, that being in business for yourself, whether you want to be an online coach, whether you want to be anything you want to be, you can legitimately make it whatever you want if you just try. And I just think people get so confined, like they believe they can't do it, that they don't do it. And you should just take more risk. I think people be happier. It's like we talk about in coaching, you know, what do you got to lose by trying my way of doing it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I don't get those results for nothing. I mean, I think every coach kind of wants to say that, you know, and I think that's where we all kind of need to start focusing on, is having that honest dialogue.
Yeah, 100%, man. And that's pretty big when you think about it. Like, you know, me being 33 and having at least 30 years of work left, like that's plenty of time to make mistakes, take risks, and actually end up where you want to be and leave that legacy behind, right?
Right. But see, here's where it gets screwed up. Most coaches don't understand leadership. And I say that openly, and I don't give a shit. Come at me all you want, but I promise you I'm right. Level 1 is positional leadership. People have to accept this fact. The majority of people that you encounter in public think of you as a trainer, not like you think you look on IG. They think of you as their friends, like from Advocare or the If It Works Raps and all these other crazy multi-level marketers, because those were their trainers. Those were their friends. Those were their experts. And I argue that to people, and then they're like, oh, maybe you're right. I'm like, okay, now go walk with me here. The next level of leadership is permission. Level 1's position, level 2's permission. Permission is when people follow you. So I follow you, Aaron, because I want to learn whatever from you. I want to be inspired. That is me giving you permission to lead me. Yeah. And coaches in the fitness space don't really understand that, I've noticed. So, and the ones that do go and they start making their money, and then those are the ones that I've seen usually get to about 10 or 20K a month. But then there are about 10K a month. But then there's this magical thing that happens about 10K a month. There's only so much you can really keep up with unless you go up on your price. So then you have to get to an area known as production. People follow you because you produce results. Okay, they're paying attention to you. They admire you because you produce results. This is the hardest level to get to and the hardest level to maintain, from what I've seen.
Yeah.
Because it requires a whole nother gear from you. And then level 4 is people development, which is people follow you because of the people you turn out. And then level 5 is pinnacle. People follow you based upon who you are and what you believe. But that's where I argue is the biggest thing with coaching in the space right now, is understanding the leadership paradox. And then when coaches usually understand that is when they can go far. And I think that's where I tell most business leaders when I talk to them, if I could say there was any skill that I built the most, it wasn't my coaching, it was my leadership skill, which translated down to making me a better coach. Because I was able to have harder conversations with people. I was able to engage in the things that other people wouldn't, because I understood that it was trying to get to the better person.
Yeah, yeah. And is there any books that you'd recommend for building that and learning that? See how you were able to go from stage 1 to 5, it just rattled off your tongue. Like, how can people learn that sort of stuff?
Developing the Leader Within You by John Maxwell, which was the one book I said for the professional side. So he's like the granddaddy of them all when it comes to like leadership. You start there, and from there you got the 21 laws of irrefutable leadership, which he talks about what I think is the biggest law of all, which is the law of momentum. Everyone thinks that this shit's about motivation, and I promise you it's more momentum than anything else. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, it doesn't matter what day it is, I'm still usually up by 3:30 in the morning. And it doesn't matter what day it really is to me otherwise, because I know I'm just going to kind of do the same shit every day. And when I want to take breaks, I could take breaks. But man, the entrepreneur game and leadership, when you can really sharpen that skill and really embrace it and then see where you could go in all sorts of areas, it's absolutely amazing, man. I can't speak enough on that. I strictly encourage every single person to get into that.
Yeah, that's massive, man. And I think that's something that, like I said, anyone can benefit from, whether they're a coach, whether they're, you know, a client of a coach or working a 9 to 5, whatever. I think this is a whole conversation, is something that people can really benefit from if they dig in on the principles that you've shared. So I know it's probably getting close to your 7:30 bedtime there, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. But let's leave it with what's next for Jeff. What's coming up for the rest of the year that is exciting or has got the juices flowing a bit for you, and what's in the pipeline?
Oh man. You know, so where I'm at, Relentless Forever, my online brand, we're about to go launch live. I'm very fortunate. I'm working with other people on this project. I found a group of people and I said, hey, I have this idea. It's my brand, but I really think this idea would be fun. I want to include you all. We'll all be equal partners in it as coaches. And it's on this. I wanted to do a Silicon Valley startup really bad. In all the business books, I've always admired how they're willing to stand something up real fast and just fuck it up and make through this process. But I had this vision that I cast to them. I had this big, hairy, audacious goal, which was saying 5.3 million in 3 years. And I painted out the channels that we could get to. And I remember when I said it, I was like, shit, I actually think I can hit that. You know what I mean? It was like the first moment, but it's been a culmination of building all these things. And I've got that project coming out. You know, we invested, like almost like $5,000-$6,000 now in creating like a studio in the upstairs of my gym where we have a green screen and we're going to do all this content for clients. Cause I think that that's the biggest thing that everyone wants right now is content. And I think that that's where most consumers want. I think that that's where the industry through leadership can do better. And I'm hoping to capitalize on that. But besides that, man, I've got a house that's being built in August. I've worked part of my language on this one straight, but worked my fucking ass off for. And I'm happy that my youngest son gets the best schools for middle school and high school. Nice. You know, and I'm able to kind of give that to him as a father. I think that any man or any even woman too can agree with me that there's just no greater thing than when you can provide for your kids and love what you do. Yeah. I'm a very blessed person. The Excellence Cartels. When are you actually going to release this podcast? Because that'll let me know if I'm going to announce this or not.
It will probably be today or tomorrow, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Oh, I can't tell you then, but
oh no.
No. So we've got the Physique Education Collective that's coming in May in Nashville, but we're going to do a first ever Excellence Cartel podcast recording live. Right. We're going to do it at a location. I can't say where it's at, but it's going to be a huge ordeal. It'll be here in the States. Maybe by then you could travel out here and go to it. But it's going to be a big coaching event. It's going to be our first stake at wanting to teach the coaching space leadership and teaching better dynamics and evolution. So I think it's going to be a great thing. You know, right now the current trend is everything sexy and everything hormones. And we're kind of hoping to also put out there like how we can make better businesses for the consumer as well. And then hopefully I read 109 books.
109, that's the goal for this year then, yeah?
Yeah, I'll be honest. This year I don't know if I'll get that much because I got some books that are just massively thick that I just wanted to read for the sake of reading. I'm like, I've got a bunch of stuff on World War II this year. I'm about to read neuro-linguistic programming. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's like what Tony Robbins uses. And I've got a few books on that. And I don't know, man. I just try to keep it interesting. You know, I think that that's part about living. Like, you know, TV doesn't entertain me. It's very, you know, hard for me to like be stimulated like that. But when I can read something, whether it's educational or something about history, I don't know. I just feel like I feel like I always get like a little bit of enhancement from that somehow.
Yeah. Nice, man. Nice. And how
What's
many
next for
books
you?
have you
What's big
done?
for you? No, well, go ahead. What do you say?
I was gonna say, what's the total number of books that you've done this year then towards that 108 total?
I just started book 28, and this one's book 29.
That's crazy.
Your next five moves. We're reading this in TRM leadership.
Yeah.
You should join us since I know you're working with Matt. But it's your next five moves, master the art of business strategy. And it was funny because we're writing content about it, and there's a part in there where he's like, use your doubters and haters as fuel. And I wrote this piece today because we were supposed to write a content piece. It was my idea for the book club I created for leadership. Because I guess that's what I do now is I create book clubs. It was, I wrote this whole thing about, dude, like I went to counseling and they were like, that chip on your shoulder is a bad thing. It's salt in your wound. You should let it go. And you shouldn't keep that list of people you want to prove wrong in your head and let it go. And dude, I had shit written in my phone for a long time about people I wanted to prove wrong that would piss me off. And then I started getting real conflicted about it. And then one day I realized like, man, you're not feeding into the authentic you. But I realized like at that point in my life, I couldn't always go around with a chip on my shoulder. Yeah. So I started honing it as a skill. And, I can be honest, man, after just reading this book, I think it's going to be a great leadership book. I think it's going to be a great business book because I'm not motivated by the like hoorah and cheer me on kind of crowd. I'm motivated by people when they say I can't do something. Yeah. And, I like that more. I'm like, yeah, doubt me. Like, I hate to lose. So I'm all for you throwing me in that crowd.
Yeah, 100%, man. And that's powerful when somebody says you can't do something, right? And you say, well, fuck you, I'm going to prove differently.
Yeah, man. And, I really just wish, and like, if you're listening to this podcast and you ever don't believe in yourself, just DM me on IG and I'll tell you to pull your head out of your fucking ass and just look dead ahead. I'll be like, look, life is meant to be walked with your head up and your shoulders back. Yeah. And I really believe that. And I think that that's where it begins with us as health and fitness coaches, is teaching that to our clients. Like, hey, we get it. Life, your family, whoever surrounds you, all that stuff, that it's negative. But you know what? I'm going to be here. I'm going to pick you up. I'm going to dust you off. I'm going to love on you a little bit. I'm going to help support you. And we're going to go make some impact with you. And then we're going to go down. And I think that that's ultimately, if you ask me why I love doing what I do, I think it's that, because it's putting out a little bit of good, positive juju. And man, I'm just in this world. If the world's like a picture, it's a little crooked. I'm just trying to make it a little bit straighter before I go.
Nice, man. Nice. That's pretty powerful, man. And speaking of people messaging on Instagram, let's throw out the podcast, your own socials. How can people get in touch with you if they've liked what they heard, they want to dig into some leadership stuff, or just to follow along as you share these books that you're going to be reading for the next year? And let's see if you can get to 109.
Now you're talking shit to me. Now I gotta follow through. All right. So guys, first off, man, thank you for having me on. Like, this is super cool. I can honestly say I've never done a podcast in Australia, so this is by far like a super cool experience. And I didn't give a shit how late I had to be up to attend it because I was like, I'm gonna make it. You can follow me on Instagram, Jeff Unbreakable Black. On the Excellence Cartel is our podcast. It's on Apple, it's on Spotify, on YouTube, I'm Relentless Forever. Otherwise, I'm just a guy who was kind of told no, I couldn't do it. And I'm just out there enjoying a life of saying I could. And if you find what I do awesome, please share with me, and I'd love to connect. And if you guys have any good books, feel free to hit me up. I'm all for it.
Awesome. Love it, man. Love it. Well, thank you for your time, Jeff. I think this is going to go down very well. Guys, if you did enjoy this, please tag me and Jeff in this so we can just get some feedback. Let us know that you enjoyed it. And remember, guys, as well, if you can leave a 5-star review, that will mean that more people get to see this. We start ranking in the charts, and I can get on more amazing guests like Jeff for future episodes. So, Jeff, thank you for your time, buddy. I appreciate it. I encourage everyone to hit you up on Instagram, and I will speak to you very soon, buddy.
Hey, take care, man. Thank you again for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The O Show with your host, Oren McCory. If you liked this episode, then please subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening and share this on your social media. We'll see you on the next episode for more no-nonsense advice to help you supercharge your efforts in the gym, in the kitchen, and most importantly, in your head. See you then.